Hello, 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 everyone. This is Brittany Broaddus-Smith, founder and lead educator at the Intimacy Firm and creator of My Vulva and Me. Here we are with season 2, episode 2. You got McDonald's money? Today we will be talking with Dr. Lexx Brown James, Mariotta Gary Smith, and Melissa Pintor Carnagey about this new frontier of Black parenthood. Is it a new frontier? What were things like before? What are things like now? We'll look at sex positivity as it relates to Black parenting and wonder and answer the question if sex positive parenting is countercultural to Black culture. So we're going to dig into all of that and more in just a second.
My vulva, vulva and me. My vulva, my vulva and me. My vulva and me.
Yes, welcome back. And you already know how I'm in love with our theme song. We got a whole theme song. We leveled up this season. We got a theme song. We have a producer, Alexandria, man in the back doing the thing. And I'm just so excited that you all are here. And I can't wait for just all of the greatness that we're going to get into this episode. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in our special, wonderful, amazing guests.
Hey.
How are you doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome. And again, thank you. I said it when you first agreed. Thank you. I said it when I sent you the follow-up. Thank you. And I'm saying it now. Thank you. I know you all are doing such amazing work and could be doing anything else right now, but you are here with me. And I am just like beyond humble right now. Like I can't even, because like low key, if I cry before this episode is over, don't be shocked because cheering of all this greatness here is just really more than I can. Honestly, it's really so, as is per custom for My Vulva and Me, instead of introducing you, I want you all to introduce yourself because we should have space to big ourselves up. We're not playing small. We're not being humble. I want all the things, all the letters, all the happenings, all of the bestselleriness, all of the activism royalty, because we have a Black activism royalty lineage line here. I did my research. I found some articles. I found some stuff. But I'm gonna let them tell their story themselves. You can see by the faces who I might be talking about. So we'll start with Melissa, then Mariotta, then Dr. Lexx.
Brittany, thank you. When you originally invited me on, we had conversations around, identity and Blackness, and so I just want to thank you for creating these spaces, and I'm just really excited for what's ahead for My Vulva and Me and the book that you have coming up. And so I'm just so honored always to be in partnership and collaboration with you on this journey. So my name's Melissa Carnagey. My pronouns are she or they. I am an Austin-based sexuality educator. I'm a licensed social worker, and I'm a parent. I have 3 young people in my world. My oldest is 21. So I've been parenting since I was 17. And I have a 10-year-old and also a 7-year-old bonus son. And so the work that I do is sex positive families. I've been in that particular work for the last 3.5 years. And it really, it's a marriage of my personal experience, my lived experience, as well as my professional experience. So prior to that, I've been in the field of HIV, sexually transmitted infections, and sexual health as a social worker. I did case management, prevention work, not at the nonprofit, the state government levels. And within the realm of sex ed, I've had the great pleasure of teaching young people in classrooms, writing curricula, and it's just been an amazing journey, of almost 15 years now of working in this field that I love so much because there's always so much to learn. There are never enough voices, there are never enough perspectives that really enrich this experience around being a sexually healthy human being. And certainly in the societies that we live in and all the intersections and the role that all of that plays in our existence. So yeah, and I recently published a book. It's called Sex Positive Talks to Have with Kids. And that really was the culmination of, again, years of experience of raising sexually healthy young people and doing this work, knowing what parents, what's really holding parents back, these days in terms of having talks and why it's so important. So I think that's about it for me.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Mariotta.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I was so honored to be included with this amazing panel. I stand for both of these folks on a regular basis. So I am incredibly humbled to be here and to support you and to uplift you and the Intimacy Firm. I will be singing the theme song for the rest of the week. So for those who don't know me, when you hear me crooning, my vulva and me, just redirect yourself to the website, purchase the products, support Miss Brittany. That's what I need to say about that. So my name is Mariotta Gary Smith, and my pronouns are she, her, and they. And I am a Pacific Northwest-based cultural sexologist and sexuality educator. I'm one of the co-foundresses of WOCSHN, Women of Color Sexual Health Network, which turned 10 years old this last year. We're officially a double digit. And I am incredibly honored to have been able to be part of a movement of really lifting up and re-emphasizing the importance of our field of sexuality and that it's been built on our bodies and our backs of all Black folk. I choose to center Black folk all the time, and that's not to set aside anyone else who also belongs in the space, but I'm going to center what I know for myself, and that is Blackness first. I am, as Brittany alluded to, I do have some family lineage that I don't talk about often. I am the niece of an Olympic medalist who raised their fist in 1968. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to leave that there. And my grandparents on my mother's side registered Black folks to vote when it was illegal in the early 40s when they were in Oregon. So I get it from both sides. I come by it honestly. I get it from my mama and my daddy. And I'm really honored to be here and to talk about how, what does parenting look like as a childless person by choice, but I'm also somebody's auntie, godmama, and cared, trusted adult, older person. And what does that role look like in helping people as we parent our children in our communities? Being able to help young people grow into these fully, honored folk around their bodies and what is acceptable and what isn't, and that pleasure is their birthright, especially as a Black person. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Dr. Ray.
Hi, don't forget Mariotta Conference TT. I'm dropping the kids off at the room. So I am Dr. Lexx Brown James. There's a lot of letters behind my name. I am a certified sexuality educator, certified sexuality educator supervisor, and a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I get to merge both of my worlds at the Institute for Sexuality and Intimacy, which is my private practice here in St. Louis, Missouri. I identify as a Black, fat, pansexual Southerner who was a previously nursing parent and a recovering Baptist. So all of that means that I talk about sex and sexuality a lot. There's not much that I haven't seen and or heard of. And I have been a practicing therapist for over 10 years now. Wow, that's a lot to say for 10 years. And then I do my work here in St. Louis, specifically with couples, Black queer couples mainly. And then I do education in reproductive justice and also building sex positive families. So standing next to Melissa is, my heart has grown 3 sizes because I just love them so much. And of course, Brittany, I got a notification that your shirt is on the way to my house. So I'm excited about that too. And of course, next to a foundress like of WOCSHN, who has been my family home, is amazing. If you don't know and follow me, my hashtag is she trolling me. And so I have 2 wonderful gems that are 2 and 3 right now. And really, I'm just trying to raise toddlers with shame-free sex ed. It's part of the reason why I got into this work. I had a very sexual liberated household, and I really want specifically folks with Black and brown bodies to not only know that pleasure is accessible and a right for them, but to be able to move through and believe themselves when they're having experiences and able to decide those experiences and exercise body autonomy. And so I talk about the trials and tribulations of maintaining that. Again, being a Southern Black recovering Baptist at times, it can be really, really trying, but also a lot of fun. And I have to say, it is the only thing I do at 100%, trying every day. It is the only thing I actually put all forth of my effort every single day in. And as much as they troll me, I love that I do see it paying off. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Brittany.
Awesome. Thank you. This is just like, did y'all hear all of the things, like all of, I've done this and I've done this and I come from this and I'm doing this and I'm here like me, little me amongst all these giants. I just can't.
Little.
I mean, and that's not like a faux like playing small type of situation, but it's just like I started at Weiner in 2015, and that was when like I really decided, okay, what I wanted to do. And so being at Weiner and seeing Dr. Lexx, like there was like something that happened one time at Weiner during one of our weeks. Dr. Lexx had to like shut something down, and like the bossness of it just was like, I didn't even know she was.
I bet it was epic. I bet it was a beautiful
It was like
breakdown.
literally. And I was sitting in like the lecture hall, like maybe 8 rows up, like, and they were like, and I never had the privilege or the honor to sit in your class, but I've just been like, and then Mariotta, like to be a member of WOCSHN and just like to know the history, and like I like stand for everything that you do, and every time I see like WOCSHN folks doing things like, and so I was like, I started my message like 3 times and then deleted it. I was like, it's just too, like I was talking about shooting shots for this season on Facebook, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's saying, like I couldn't believe it. And Melissa, you already know, like seriously, I say that everywhere, for the last, whenever we were in Chicago, and you said, find your people and talk to them, that literally changed the trajectory of my professional life, because I was doing this dance in between the two, between the field of sexology and the church. Y'all know I love Jesus. I'm very unapologetic in my Jesus love. And I always was, but I was stuck with how much Jesus could I give the people. And Melissa was like, you said those words, find your people and talk to them. And I was just like, well, that was simple. The most profound thing anybody's ever said to me. So I am just like, honestly, so grateful that I have you all here. So y'all know I live for a good game. Y'all know me and games, the games are my thing. So we are getting ready to play Battle of the Black Moms. So for our guests that are watching and want to play along in the comments or however you want to participate, this is how it'll go. I will give you a scenario, and then I will put on the screen 4 iconic Black moms. You will then need to select the person, the mom that you feel fits that scenario the best, and give me a quick minute or so reason as to why. And for our guests, if you need me to fill in as best as I can, because some of them I was just pulling like, I think this was a mom. So I may not know, but I will fill in as best as I can the type of personality that they have. But I think that the ones that we picked were pretty good. So let's start. Alex, you can go ahead and bring up the first group. Okay, so we're gonna leave it up for a minute. So this mom is the most likely to be saved as best friend in your phone. If you all are out, this is the mom that may either tell you not to call her mom in public, or if somebody says, oh, I thought y'all were sisters, would get all giddy and fall all over themselves because they're your mom, but they're more like your good girlfriend. So who do we think? So that was Cookie Lyons, Lisa Landry. Lisa Landry's at the top left. That's Ruby Johnson on the right, Cookie Lyons, and Nikki Parker.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Nikki Parker.
Okay, why so?
Only because I think I saw that in an episode before when she was trying to get with somebody. But I love Nikki Parker's just like down to earthness of like being involved with her kid. I think it was overbearing at times. However, a lot of fun. Like we can wear matching outfits, we can show out. She was like willing to pledge with her kid. I was like, wow. All right, mom. Like I can call you soror too and be sisterly. So I would vote Nikki Parker. And plus, like, Black don't crack for real. So she don't look like many people mama either. And we both chunky. So we could pass together as sisters. So I will take some of that. I vote Nikki Parker.
Awesome. Melissa, Mariotta? Melissa, do you know any of these? Do you know any of these?
I do, but I'm horrible at pop culture or watching shows. Like we kind of said beforehand. So I've been parenting since I was 17, and we didn't even have a TV for several years in that whole time period. I'm just saying, and this was pre-Netflix, pre-Hulu, and all that other stuff. So forgive me, but I'm gonna let y'all take it.
No worries at all. Yeah.
I appreciate Lexx's choice, and I totally sparkle to that. And I selected Lisa Landry only because I watched that show with my younger cousins that I used to take care of, and they so responded to how she was matchy with her kids, which I thought was wonderful. And I detest matchiness. That's not what I do in their life. And so for that fact alone, I'm like, yeah, they really responded to her. And I remember that so clearly because I would just be like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. That's just not me. But I just remember her. She was so engaged in similar ways to Nikki Parker. It was just on a different end, the way she was engaged, but she was fully present for her children as much as she wanted to be. And so that's, and they appreciated that. And she recognized that. So I chose Lisa in honor of my cousins because I was not the matchy kid.
I probably would have chose Lisa. I mean, Nikki Parker is just knowing the character is more like, because then on the series premiere, they came out dressed for the first day of school in the same outfit twice. And so she was trying to like relive her childhood that she didn't have because she also had her child young. I think she had Kim at either like 15 or 16. And I would have picked her, but I also resonated very much because I was Tia and Tamara's, what's the name of the show? Yeah, on the show, Tia and Tamara's age when the show came out. And so the way Lisa was and the friendliness of how she loved her daughter and low-key wanted to be a triplet, I resonated with that as well. Okay, so number 2, we have next. We have Claire Huxtable. This is Marion Gilbert, Dee Mitchell, and Wayne. Oh,
Mrs. Wayne.
Yes, Mrs. Wayne. I knew her first name, but I'm blanking on it. Mrs. Wayne. Yes. So you have worked on this paper you can bring it down now, Alex. You worked on this paper for 2 weeks, up to the wee hours, every single night. You've turned it in. It's a essay paper. You turn it into school. You get the grade back, and you got a D. Which mom is most likely to go to the school the next day?
Okay, so In real life, my mama would have been up in the school the next day. Since she is not here, I will pick the second best thing, and that I will pick Mrs. Wayne. And that's only because she rode hard for her what did she call him? Chipmunk. She rode hard for her
Chipmunk.
chipmunk. And my mother looks like Patti LaBelle. So there it is. There it is.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else?
So I stand Patty. I stand Patty. My mama and Patti LaBelle had on matching furs at a concert once with a halo. So I stand Patty. I think though I would pick D because she already worked in the school. So therefore her mama would she'd already beat her and she know I know you trying our family right now. My kid's not a D student. Because my mom would be like, do you need me to handle it? If you need me to handle it, I'll come. But if you don't need me to handle it, then you good. So I think I would pick D Mitchell because she would actually have the thesis statement behind what was going on. Whereas Mrs. Wayne would be like, I know you didn't just fail my chipmunk.
Right.
What's wrong with y'all? My chipmunk is smart. Come on, baby, show him you smart, right? So I think I would do D for the argument sake.
Melissa, do you have one? No. Oh.
I mean, I watched the Cosby Show. That's all I got. But I don't think I would be a fair contribution because I can't assess all
And
all the other moms.
And you know what's funny? I thought about Claire because she was highly educated and things but she also, and I would think I would take a different approach than Dr. Lexx. I feel like Dee and Mrs. Huxtable would push back on the child and ask them if they've done their due diligence and the teacher didn't give you an A, a D, you earned a D. And that's not something my mom would have said, and that would have set me off as a child. I did not earn a D. I did my good work and they just don't like me. And so that was that I think I would have picked Adele was her first name, Adele Wayne, Mrs. Wayne. And because I always wanted growing up, I wanted somebody to say, why you do that to my chipmunk? But my mom was very much on accountability and I will step in if need be, but just know when I get there, there's no off switch. So make sure this is the type of heat that you want. I'll be like, all right, never mind. I'll take care of it because you get ready to embarrass me. And now I got to go back to school the next day. So, all right, last one. We have Florida Evans. Is that her real name on the show? Or was that her real life name? No. Anyway, Florida Evans, yes. Maya Denise Wilkes, Tasha Wright, and Rochelle Rock. Rochelle is from Everybody Hates Chris. Tasha Wright is from The Game. Maya Denise Wilkes is from Girlfriends. And of course, Florida's from Good Times. So it is Wednesday. There's only enough money for one meal that has to last you till Friday. Which mom is one, most likely to say, you got McDonald's money? And two, use the last of the household income to buy the items, make the food that'll last the family until Friday when the payday comes. Ooh, I got a stumper. Yay. That was Rochelle Rock, Florida Evans, Tasha Wright, Maya Denise Wilkes.
I would vote Everybody Loves Chris's mom.
Oh, Rochelle.
Because she was like, I feel like she spoiled the kids every now and again from the show, the clips that maybe I saw in commercials. And they were always perpetually broke, I think, in the show. So I think she would be like, do you got McDonald's money? And she'd be like, I got good kids. Let me treat them right when we can. So I think I'd say Chris's mom.
Chris's mom. Okay.
Yeah, I know we have to choose one, so that's part of my issue. I feel like I need to rebel.
Do your thing. Do your thing.
So I certainly would choose Rochelle from Everybody Hates Chris, because she definitely was going to be there for her kids and support her kids and do what she needed to do. But I'm also thinking about Miss Evans, just because of the historical context of that show and what it represented, and knowing that her character certainly had the experience of having to make ends meet or stretch things out. The other two, not so much for me, right? But for me, it was like it was the tie between those two.
Melissa?
Yeah, McDonald's money. I was thinking Good Times. The other half of it, the other half of the experience, I wasn't so sure about. I felt like those were. I don't know if we were thinking the same thing, but I felt like those were maybe two different experiences or two different personalities. So that's where I was feeling one for one. But then, yeah, didn't watch the other shows. I watched Good Times, but didn't watch the other shows.
So Maya, I don't think I ever remember Maya. Like Maya will make things happen. There was times where after her divorce that she had to make things happen. Tasha, we see her having surplus, but talk lots about what it used to be back then, because she also was a young mom. But I think I would have picked Florida, because I think that, and with Rochelle, they were just extremely frugal. I don't know if I got broke from them. It's just they were kind of like balling on the budget. I have trolls as well. If you hear noise in the background, they don't respect me at all, but they're there. But I think Florida, because it was almost like that was their perpetual space of Wednesday coming, and then we have to do until Friday, and it was just like, and she did it with like a smile, and like there was no love lost, and it kind of just happened. So that's what I think. Well, thank you so much. How was that? Did we enjoy that? Did we like the Battle of the Black Moms? We like that game? Awesome. Okay, so then that will lead us right into our first question. And this, as I said, this is girls' night. We're just having a good time. We're talking, we're chopping it up. So you can jump in as you see fit. Some questions I'll be directing specifically to certain folks, but the big question is overall thing, is Black parent, we looked at some pretty iconic moms with specific experiences and different presentations, but is Black parenthood, Black motherhood uniquely different from parenting in other cultures? And if so, how?
I think I'm going to jump in first. I'm going to try. And that's only because I'm going to yield the floor to the two experts who are parenting folk. In the context of how I understand Blackness in the Americas here, I think there is a very unique and different way that Black folks parent and or raise their children that are informed by our history, our ancestral history and memory that we do have and that we don't fully understand, that shows up in different ways. The cultures and the ways that our families and neighborhoods were crafted and curated, and how that impacts and influences what we do. I also think regionally it looks different geographically where folks are, and how that informs different ways of bringing folks together, and folks not necessarily having community or holding community in the same way. I think in the context of how Black folks parent their kids, I think there is a thread that runs through a lot of Black communities that I could find regardless of where I am in the Americas, and yet also understand that it's going to look different, right? But to hold that there's a piece of consistency that I'm going to find around. All of us may have different experiences, but we can all relate to what it means for a mother to say, do you want me to come in here and talk to these people? Because when I get here, this is what's going to happen. We all understand what that sounds like and what that feels like. It may not necessarily function in the same way, right? So I think for me, as a non-parenting person, and as someone who is blessed to be on the periphery of a lot of young people's lives, I'm very clear that it feels and it looks different, the way that Black folks parent their children. Even if, and I'm talking even in the context of folks who have a lot of privilege and access, right? The way in which young Black kids, youth, the way that young Black folks are engaging with people in all areas and arenas and a privilege and power access, there is a consistent thread of accountability and of how you actually need to show up and be, that I think is, for me, is something that I find all the way across where I've been in places. So I think that piece of it, which I really appreciate, is core to what is so wonderful about Black parenting and Black motherhood, and also what is so challenging at times for me.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Lexx, did you have anything to add?
So I agree a lot with what our foundress said, that I do think there's commonality in threads across all collectivistic cultures. I'll say cultures that turn inward towards community and toward one another, for values and support and advice. I do think that it is unique being a Black parent, because especially here in the United States, and I'm from the South, right? So being a Southerner and ways that I was raised, I still say no ma'am and yes sir and no mix to people based on their pronouns and how they identify. And I'm grown, right? I didn't push out babies of my own, or had them pulled out rather. So there's still this level of partial deference in how I've perceived respect to be. I was raised to always speak to another person of color when you see them. And when I moved up north, that was not the case. I was like, oh, so we don't talk to people. And I had somebody follow me into a train station because I said hello. And they were like, well, you said hi to me, so that meant you must want to talk to me. And I was like, it's 32 degrees outside, sir. Ain't nobody trying to talk to you right now. I just want to be warm, right? But I definitely think that because of the unique challenges that come from the systems of oppression that Black bodies have to operate in our country, there is a different level of parenting that takes place. Like when you talk to Black and brown bodies and say, like, there's the talk that we need to happen around police brutality. There's the talk that we need to happen around, can you take something of your own into a store and come out with it? Right? There's rules why we had the don't ask for nothing and you're not gonna get nothing, don't take nothing, so it won't be nothing conversations that across privilege levels, people that don't look like us don't have to have those conversations or don't necessarily know what they mean. And so I think that's a unique experience of also caution, but joy. My gyms are really into hip hop right now, like hip hop choreography to Baby Shark. There's a Baby Shark pop and Level Up, and it is all sorts of like booty shaking and hip hop dancing, and my kids are living for it. And that's another part of this culture that is not necessarily looked at as a negative and downside of like, this is how we're expressing joy with our bodies, and they get to be a part of that. And so I think there is like HBCUs and all of these things that are in this cultivated experience of a myriad of Blackness that is also unique when we come to parenting. So I do think it's different.
Yeah, I agree with you both that it's just something, it's different. And I will venture to say it's just something, there's something about it. Like, it's like, I feel this way with most things that Black people do. There's just like a sauce to it that's just, just there. So, and Melissa, you mentioned earlier in your introduction that you and I had talked about a lot about identities and things like that, and Blackness. And we're a couple episodes from now, we're going to get into Black enough and what counts as Black and all of those type of things. But to this particular question, with your identities as they are, how has this culture, if you will, of Black parenthood played a role in your own life, in your own parenting?
Yeah, no, I would say that, so for folks that don't know, so I'm Black, Puerto Rican, and Mexican. And so in my earliest years, my foundational years, I spent a lot of time in Chicago I was born in Chicago, spent a lot of time in Chicago with grandparents, my Black grandma in particular, my Black, cousins, my Black, uncles on the south side of Chicago. And that was my earliest foundational experience. And then we were uprooted from that and taken to Texas, into whiteness. And so I went from seeing like no white people, into seeing all white people, And then I spent my school, parts of each year in Texas in whiteness. And I watched, and I've only been more in my adult years reflected on this, but I really watched my parents try to keep up with that. Like, to them, that's what success meant, was ultimately whiteness, and was aligning with whiteness and appeasing whiteness. And I didn't know any different, being a child in that experience. I didn't know, I didn't have that language. That was not anything that was being discussed in my home. So I was taken from Black culture. I was taken from, um, and the thing I want to say is love. To me, Blackness has always equaled love, because that certainly was my experience. I know love because of my grandma. I know love because of my cousins. I know love at a level that I've not known except for what I share with my children. And that, to me, very much was influenced, and block parties, and just like we've talked about, just community. And to be in whiteness, to then move into white spaces, it definitely was more, it was more individualistic. It wasn't looking out for each other. It wasn't a sense of belonging. And I know that a lot of folks that end up having that kind of experience, where whiteness has that influence, and you don't belong in that. It ends up, so I'm glad you're doing an episode on that, because it ends up influencing. And then ultimately, when you become a parent, and depending on what identities your children hold, or your partners hold, or all of that stuff, right? It all plays a role. I believe. I feel, from my personal experience, all of this plays a role, and yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's a great segue to our, I've been working real hard on my segues and my transitions. I'm quite proud. And I'd like to, well, you and I, again, I'll stay with you, and then we'll come with everyone else to offer to this particular question. You had a post a while back about, what do I do if I walk in on my child and they are masturbating? And you responded, apologize for not knocking, and then, come back out, right? And I'm a sexuality educator. I find myself to be sex positive in a sex negative world, but I'm also very Black. And I had the blackest of moms and the blackest of grandmoms and all of the things. And I was like, knock where? On the door in my house that I paid for. And I didn't, and immediately I was like, oh, Brittany, you have some work to do. And I have two boys. I have two children with penises, and I'm just like, that's like a thing that's going to happen soon. And then I'm like, am I going to knock? So what? How? This is a twofold question. So I hope I can answer it clearly. How are we parenting differently than that of our parents? When we think about knocking, when we think about things like, you don't have McDonald's money. We had talked, Dr. Lexx, you said the collectivism, where we like terms like, do you have McDonald's money? And let me give you something to cry for. And all those things are like language things that we all share. But is that the same way we're parenting right now? I talked about the new frontier of Black parenthood. Like, is it different, or are they more of the same?
So I can say that, so again, parenting from an early age, the first 5 years, 10 years of my parenting look very different than my parenting, so my 10-year-old now is getting a completely, just a liberated, connected, just talks about everything, shares all the feelings, has so many opinions, has so much to say, and gets heard and listened to and affirmed. My oldest had the experience of, me being a younger person, and having my own traumas, and knowing cognitively that I wanted to do things differently, because I knew what it felt like to feel like I didn't have a voice, to feel like I was property, and not a whole and separate human, you know? And I didn't want that same experience. I didn't grow up connected, having a real connection or understanding to my body. My parents didn't openly talk about, you know, sexuality or sex. I knew it was something I could sneak around and watch on TV, or I could hear in music, but I wasn't allowed to repeat or say those things. Or a lot of times I didn't know what I was singing about, and then they would be like, "Don't sing that, don't say that." You know, I'd be like, "What? Oh, you know," and nothing was explained, right? You were being directed by your parents. Your parents owned you. And so I knew I wanted to do it differently. And I think that for sure, I believe wholeheartedly that if we are interested in liberation and in allowing our young people to know themselves, to navigate this world in a way that is confident, where they can feel confidence, and I do believe that that confidence can ultimately keep them safer in this world. I don't want to perpetuate those things that I experienced that made me feel small, that made me feel like I didn't have a voice or I didn't matter. And I do believe that my parents' experiences, their parents, that, you know, generationally, the experiences, there was necessity that looked different as to why, and there was trauma that looked different as to why they led homes in the way that they did. And there was a different level of protection. I think that our world is different in some significant ways. And so I do think we ultimately have to meet our young people in a very different way to prepare them.
So I'm going to jump in because that whole knock on the door thing, and Brittany, the feelings that came up for you. So I'm going to tell you what my trolls did to me. The oldest was like knocking. She hit the door or something. I was like, "Don't be knocking on my door like that." And she was like, "It's our door, Mom." And I was like,
Well,
"You're
what
right.
bill do you pay?
All right. Well, we need to treat our things nicely because we are in this together because this is our home, right?" And I was like, "I'll be damned. All right, you're right, little baby. Now stop doing whatever you're doing." So that being said, I had a very sex positive upbringing. So much for it was a little bit overwhelming, right? There was no such thing as privacy in my household. So my mother, I'm a twin, by the way. So Mariotta, you in the not matching outfit shows that you are not a twin. Because we stand for matching outfits as young twins. But I grew up in a household. My mom told me that I was going to menstruate 3 days before it started. Told my brother that and we're twins, we hit puberty at the same time. I feel so bad for her. She survived that. But night emission dreams were going to happen, and we talked about it as a family together. Bought me my first vibrator when I was 12. Right. And was like, "Hey, if you tell me when you want to lose your virginity," because that was still the language that was used, "I will get you a hotel room and make sure you're on birth control before you do it." And for me, that was a bit much. I was like, "Oh, I don't really think you need to know when this is going down, Mom. I'm good." Right. And so parenting in my household, I want that my kids to have the same access to knowledge. So when my bio teacher, Salud, told me that when you glue two construction pieces of paper together and separate them, and that's what sex is, and you leave residue on each other, I was like, "But what about condoms, sir? That is not, I don't understand what's going on here." So I've always had that knowledge, but raising my children, I want them to know that there is privacy. And so the touching of the vulvas has started at 3 over here. And I'm just like, "Are you sitting on my lap touching your vulva?" And my gym is like, "Yeah, Mom, it feels nice." And I'm like, "Oh, can we do private things in private places? Can you please respect, like, my body is not comfortable with this. So how about we shift your body to a room where you can explore that all by yourself, right?" And she's like, "Oh, I'll wait. It's okay." And I'm like, "Okay, please go wash your hands," right? And this is how we have to navigate these conversations, which would be different, and especially in my neighborhood. So yeah, I think we're parenting differently because we have more access to knowledge. Also, I think the world is a little bit more understanding of where some of the sex positivity comes from. Everything is not just so much precaution. We now realize that as adults, we don't want our adult kids, when they decide to have sex or engage in things, we don't want them to have crappy sex lives and learn through the pain that we had to learn through. We'd rather them learn through some wisdom. And so that calls for us raising and teaching and parenting them differently.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mariotta, so you use a language that I enjoy that I'm going to use in my own language. Now I'm going to take some of it with you, that you're a non-parenting person by choice, but yet you have young people in your life that you care for, that look up to you, and all of those things. So when we think about being young and Black, what is this idea of the talk as it relates to being young and Black? I mean, and your experience with it, or giving and receiving it in your life.
So I really I want to appreciate what Lexx and Melissa shared. And while they were talking, I was thinking about my own experience now that I'm on the other side of being an older person, in the sense of I'm able to look back at my life and I can see, right, what it was like. And I was raised in a relatively sex positive household. I was raised by a single parent. And my mother was influenced in the way that she raised me because she wanted a different relationship with me than she had with her mother, right? And her history. And recognizing that my parents are pre-civil rights children, right? So they grew up in the era of segregation. So understanding what did that mean in terms of bodily autonomy and safety, and being able to have boundaries honored and respected. So like being mindful of how that impacted them. My mother worked for the National Black Women's Health Project in the mid 80s through the early 90s, and so that was a place where there was a lot of teaching and reinforcement of Black folks having, and Black women, Black femmes in particular, having the space and the right to advocate for themselves around their health and their sexuality. That pleasure was something that they had the right to seek out. How to ask questions. I was, all of the women, it happened to be women who worked at the organization, all had daughters. And so when the women were working, the daughters were put together. We were usually put in a room and they were like, work it out, figure it out. And that meant, if you don't like each other, figure it out. If you all like each other, figure it out. And so we would sit and have these conversations about puberty and masturbation and sex and all of these other things. And so this is how I got started in that way. And so I think about the things that I was able to do with my mother to talk about menstruation. I had a party when I started my period. I was mortified and I hated it. But my mother was like, no, we're going to celebrate it. She went and got a cake, and the cake had happy menstruation on it. And she invited my friends over and they got party favors. And I went and got in the new thing, and this was a family tradition, and I carry it to this day. You go and you get new draws, as my grandma would say. She called them draws. Everything was draws. And so I went and got new draws, and that was like the marking of this very special moment. And I was mortified, and my friends were like, your mom is the coolest. And I was like, you can have her. And that wasn't true. In that moment, I was like, But when I recognized that the experiences that Black folks have had around their bodies and around what happens with their bodies, and ownership of their bodies, I try to remember those moments and impart that to the young people that I'm privileged to be present with, right? To tell them that if they don't want to hug me when I see them because I might be overjoyed, I need to respect their right to not be touched. And I might be sad about that, but that's my sadness. And so what I need to do is honor what my young people say that they need or want from me, and to be mindful of how I talk to them about their bodies. I grew up hearing things from elders in my family that were not, their intent wasn't to be harmful, and yet it still did. So to be mindful of, like, what is it that I'm saying to my young people? How am I pouring into them about their bodies and about, what's valuable about them, what is meaningful to them, and to be able to express themselves clearly, to be able to teach them how to give words to their feelings and to have those words respected and honored. So I think in my role as the auntie, godmama, trusted adult, it's important for me to be mindful of what I experienced as a young person, and how my mother reinforced that across many different relationships that we had in our family and into our extended community. And what is it that I'm doing to reinforce those lessons to my young people? So when I feel like I need to say something that probably is out of pocket, I probably don't need to say it, because it's not necessarily helpful in the ways that I want it to be.
Awesome. Thank you. And Melissa and Dr. Lexx, you all also answered that question. Is there a shift or a curated way that this talk has to happen when talking with Black and Brown young people? Or is the talk in general, no matter who you're talking to?
Are we talking about race, sex?
I mean, I was talking about just piggybacking off of Mariotta's response to the question about having to talk about sex and her experience with it. When we have this talk, or this what has known to be known the talk, particularly regarding sex, is it a different talk with Black and Brown young people? Is there a different lens that this talk has, had through because they are Black and Brown kids?
I think that what resonated for me with what Mariotta said was that our experiences can look different than white parents in terms of what traumas, what barriers, what, again, generationally was passed down to them in terms of ultimately an understanding of bodies and sex. I didn't have a sex positive upbringing, and so I parent from a place of wanting to provide the things that I didn't have. And I believe that I experienced what I did. I did have like Catholic influences in the household, and so there was a lot of shame around sex, a lot of silence around sex. But I think my parents were also trying to figure out what they even ultimately believed in. I think that each generation, for the most part, is trying, to undo, or, and I just think that with Black and Brown identities and lived experiences, there's a hell of a lot more to have to undo.
Yeah.
And it's not even that, it's just constantly still facing every day. And so preparing, I think also too, is just the media, the way the media continues to portray Black and Brown, folks, and having to ensure that that young people are aware of that, are literate in terms of being able to interpret what the media is trying to do intentionally in portraying Black and Brown bodies in that certain way, and sexuality in that way. So that because I don't think that the messages ultimately aren't the same, that white children, non-Black and Brown children, they're not getting hit with that same normalization of harm and trauma and hypersexualization. And so it can be confusing because, again, as young people look for role models or look to see themselves represented, or people that look like them, again, the representation, the options don't look the same for always, and aren't as front and center in positive ways always, for Black and Brown young people. And so having to talk to them overtly about that, like name that, so that they don't internalize, which is something that I didn't have that named for me.
Yeah.
So as I kept, I only saw, and like we saw with that game, I wasn't being exposed. My parents were not making a conscious effort because they were seeking to align more with whiteness. Whiteness was rightness. So, if now that I have young people, that's something that I get to do differently, And my son right now downstairs is watching Family Reunion, the Netflix show, and loves it, and we get to talk about a lot of the themes and things. And that just wasn't something that I necessarily had, because my parents were not trying to show up in that kind of way.
And so I think that's a good segue, Melissa. So part of my life, I was actually raised in Texas, and the talk, I think, is something throughout life that we have. And so for us there were 2 Black kids in my school, which were me and my twin. And I remember one of the earliest memories was at the daycare where they were playing this game, and all my friends were surrounding my brother, and I'm like, oh, what are we doing? This looks like fun. And they would run past them. But I noticed my brother's in tears. And I'm like, why are you crying? What's wrong? And I remember walking up to him, and he said, Tootie, none of y'all can ever call me that. He says, Tootie, my penis hurts. They're trying to grab my penis to see what it looks like. And we were in 1st grade maybe, and our teacher was watching. And so next comes little Ariel. I'll never forget this. And I grab Ariel and I throw her to the ground because she's harming my brother, right? And then we didn't understand what was going on. We actually, I got into a big fight with all of these girls who were supposed to be my friends. I kicked ass as a 1st grader. I would just like to say that. But my brother and I had to stand and face the wall for the rest of recess because we were aggressive and violent, right? But I learned early on that there's something different about these Black and brown bodies. From even, I had a larger body as a kid as well. So people tugging on my clothes as a kid. Right before I got my menstruation, my teacher said, oh, it's because your jeans are too tight. And I'm like, what? That's why my mama let me leave the house in these jeans. I don't think they're too tight. And it was actually my period, right? So I think the way we do have the talk is vastly different because of the things that media, because of the things even our own communities still believe. Well, her hips spread and she must be having sex. Or this is what happens during puberty. Maybe that's what it is. Or don't be smelling yourself because of the hypersexuality. But nobody talks about that's just the Jezebel idea. Nobody talks about the fat, dark-skinned girl and how nobody sees her as sexual. And so she's using sexual equivalency and sexual attention to get attention and desire and wantedness. Nobody talks about her, right? So because of that inter-community dialogue and the excess media and existing in whiteness, I think we do have to have the talk a little bit differently and steady. I tell parents this all the time. You're always having the talk. You taught your kid how to wash their butt. That's part of the talk. You taught your kid that, we don't do this in public spaces. That's part of the talk. You taught your kid that if they don't want a hug, then you don't give them a hug. That's part of the talk. You've been having this conversation, and this is just another piece of this conversation. And so it's throughout life that we're always having the talk. And it does need to look a little bit different, right? Especially because of the way that our skin is weaponized and criminalized.
I think it's just really interesting, just listening to you all and thinking, I'm 32, and I wouldn't say that I grew up in a sex negative space. I would say it was sexually inappropriate, because though my mom never had conversations with me about sex, she accidentally had sex right next to me. And when I told her about it, it was like one of those movie things, not in the movies, how they come in, they meet somebody, come in and they kissing on the way in the door, falling all of clothes falling off, and then they just drop wherever they are and then just do it right there. Like we're doing.
Thank you for the context, child.
Accidentally.
I was trying to control my face. I didn't want to be on the show.
No, do face. The face is fine because it was really great.
She accidentally fell on something.
I know. I'm like, wait a minute.
No, it was really so what happened was what had happened was I was not allowed to watch. I feel like it was poetic justice. I wasn't allowed to watch because there was a lot of cursing in it. And like I was put to bed, my mom went out. We lived with my aunt at the time, my older aunt at the time. So I snuck downstairs to watch it. And it was like maybe like 1, 2 in the morning. I was downstairs watching it. And she came in, you know, like I said, she was enthralled in whatever she was doing. It was dark. But then I was like, I'm not going to make it up the steps. She's going to catch me. And then I'm going to get a beat. And I wasn't even really thinking about what was happening until like the clothes were next to me. And then there was an arm. And I was just like, and then I just laid there for the duration because I'm like, this is gross. But also I don't want to be in because I'm not supposed to be here. So that happened. And then I also did not tell her until I was good and grown because I still didn't want to get a beating because she believed in retroactive beatings. And I just was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
That's a rock in a hard place.
And right. And so,
oh my gosh, yeah.
He was in a hard place.
And then when I had my sexual debut, I was good and grown in college. And her advice was, if you're not back in this house by 12 o'clock, mind you, whole freshman in college, if you're not back in this house by 12 o'clock, the doors are going to be locked and you better have somewhere else to stay. Mind you, I had a key, but even at 18, I wasn't getting ready to, she said her door was locked, key or not, the door was locked. And the next day I went and did my business. And then the next day we were at the hair store. She looked at me at the register and was like, you're nasty. And then that was the full extent of any type of sexual conversation. We didn't talk about menstruation. My first time using a tampon, I put the whole thing in, only took the stick out and just was like around here, just like living my best life. Vagina ripped, tore to shreds because the applicator was in. And I was like, why do people do this? This is dumb. Like, pad me, please. And yeah, so that was it. So it wasn't necessarily negative, but it just was like, I often heard having sex that I learned. It was like, I was the oldest and I was like highly parentified. And it was just like, try. But I also was that kid that had cartoons on one channel, Skinemax, not quite porn, because that doesn't count as porn to me and my 9-year-old brain. Skinemax on the other channel, and then listening for someone to come and then hurry up and press previous so we could jump back and forth in between, what was happening. And so what I find though is that with my children, I'm working through trying to out parent my mom. Like I love my mom. I mean, if you follow me, you know that I'm very vocal about our relationship. Love her to death. God rest her soul. And maybe my shirt today says living for Lisa. And my sister's fussing. Before you start fussing with me, I'm going to make you one. Everybody relax. Don't holler because she doesn't have this shirt. But I want to out-parent that somehow. Like I feel like if I have enough, space, leave enough space, allow them to ask enough questions, allow them to be unique in whatever way they need, then it will make up for what I didn't have. But that also, overcorrecting, overcompensating can also be troublesome because trying to figure out what to talk to you, because I think some of you may be able to appreciate that when what you talk to your children about in your own house, if you have certain kids that like to talk, they may take that to spaces where those folks aren't ready for that conversation. And then I now have to get phone calls home from teachers because my son wants to raise his hand and says, my penis hurts. Can I go to the bathroom and look at it? Because you're not allowed to say penis in front of, the classroom and all of those things. So trying to navigate the talk and what to have and what to say and how much to give and when is really important. And we can struggle with that, but it's so good that we have tools and resources such as sex positive talks to have with kids. And literally, I had the opportunity to review the book before it released at a moment where my son and I were having a really new experience. And I literally went here to guide for the script as to what to say to even start the conversation. And so as I was reading, I was in tears because it was hard. Sex positive person, sex educator and all. When it hit my house, my good Christian house, I was just like, what do I do? But I had this. So Melissa, tell us about sex positive talks to have with kids, a guide to raising sexually healthy, informed, and empowered young people.
Thank you. That was a beautiful segue. So, yes, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, this book is a love letter, really, to parents, to parenting, to the hope that I think a lot of us enter into and try to hold with us throughout the parenting journey. I wanted to make sure that I always want to create resources that are actually something people can use. As a parent who, for many parts of my parenting, I wasn't highly resourced. I didn't, I needed to have tools, real tools, not just things that kind of provided abstract thought. So in writing this, it started out as a guide and then it just kind of took off. And Brittany, it was actually a conversation that we got to have that helped me to get clear about the direction I needed to go with this book, and that, really the conversation starters, because as we know, it's not just one conversation, it's many, many different conversations. Like Dr. Lexx said, we're having these conversations and we're sending these messages from the moment our young people enter this world. And so it's really about becoming more intentional about what messages we're sending, and knowing that it is not just about sex. It's about consent. It's about autonomy. It's about feelings. It's about pleasure. And parents need positive families, is parents need to have the education in order to get there, because of a lot of us didn't have that. We didn't have that modeled for us, and our society doesn't do a good job of creating safe spaces for us to be able to talk about these types of topics. So that's what this book does, is it allows you to, through every age and stage, from birth to young adulthood, across 12 different topics. You have conversation starters, reflective exercises. Each section has questions that can get parents thinking about what their own values are. And it's not about following a script. It's very much about, being able to choose your own adventure, but being able to do it from an informed space. And so that's what this book does.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. What is your preferred method of folks acquiring the book? Is it through your site, Amazon, which?
You can do either. We have a worldwide audience with SPF, and so Amazon. And Dr. Lexx was actually someone who I was able to consult with, because Dr. Lexx's great book, These Are My Eyes, This Is My Nose, This Is My Vulva,
Come
These Are My
on, come
Toes. Where you
on.
at? Where you at? I'm just saying.
Yeah.
This book is an amazing read that is foundational on body awareness, on gender, on consent and safety. I can let you talk about your own book, but I recommend this book for parents in the early years. And that's, again, sending that message that the talks really start at a young age. But Dr. Lexx helped me to see that Amazon, even though in all its imperfections and monopolizing, it is a resource that allows people from around the world to be able to access this. So Amazon, you can find it. It's been a #1 new release in the 4 weeks now that it's been out, every single day across like 6 different categories. And
Yes.
so I want to say that, and thank you for teaching us, to not be humble about these things. But I also want to say that
Okay.
because it's important that we know that sexual health and sex positivity, this is something that families are hungry for. They're looking for ways that they can create healthier possibilities for both themselves to heal, and also for their young people. So I'm honored that people are seeing this as a viable tool. So yeah, and you can go on sexpositivefamilies.com/book, and you can also get the ebook version if you prefer a digital version or don't want to deal with Amazon.
Awesome. And Melissa, you beat me to it. I was also going to allow Dr. Lex the space to talk about your book as well. So if you would like to tell the people about this wonderful, wonderful, amazing book. And thank you.
I'm super flattered, and I might turn red because I'm a little pale in the winter. So these are my eyes, this is my nose, this is my vulva, these are my toes. It's actually my postpartum depression project. I had postpartum depression with my gym, my Garnet, and it's not talked about enough. So anywhere as many as 1 in 8 to 1 in 4 new people identified as moms have postpartum depression, and then 1 in 10 dads have postpartum depression, and they don't have the non-binary numbers because research. But we don't talk about it enough, and my fear was being left behind. I stand with Titans, as you see, and I was at home covered in breast milk and baby throw up, and I have a doctorate in Navient loans that say that I have a doctorate, and I felt like I wasn't keeping up, and I was really alone in not progressing because I was supposed to want motherhood to this beautiful baby, and I have the privilege to be a domestic engineer, a stay-at-home parent for a while, and it was supposed to be all good, and I wasn't. So when I got pregnant with my second, I was like, I got to do something, and I wanted a book that had multiple types of kids in it. There's a person in a hijab, there's a kid in a wheelchair, there's an amputee in this book, there's a kid that wears a turban, so who could be like a Sikh in this book, and I needed that representation. It does talk about a non-binary kid. It talks about people who identify as one gender as another might not have the same genitals to match, and that's what I want to teach my child. And that's what we're teaching our family, to accept various types of people and to respect their bodies and to normalize that this is a vulva, and it's never too early. My kids have known that they have a vulva since 18 months, I think. It might have been one of the first words my oldest said. And when my oldest went to Montessori school, and even when we talked to the preschool, I was like, this is the language that they use. Do not change their language. And I was told I might get a red flag, so they're going to have to note it so they don't call the Department of Children and Family Services on me. And I was like, well, let's have a come to Jesus conversation, because you're not protecting your children at your school. And they were like, whatever do you mean? I was like, let's go. And then their Montessori school actually ended up ordering this book for their classrooms, as well as books with non-binary and also same-gender loving parents, because we're not here to play these games. So that's what this book does for me. It's fun animations. I love getting the videos of 2 and 3-year-olds. My kids have memorized it at this point, so they'll be able to read through it. And so my 3-year-old will sit down. I'm reading, Mom. I'm reading. I'm like, excuse me for trying to get ready for bedtime, but enjoy your book. And it also was a little heartbroken every time my mail went out. She's like, you're mailing my book away. I'm like, that's not your copy. This is the other one. But knows vulva. So my 2-year-old, recently 2-year-old, she'll be like, vulva, that's vulva word. Vulva, Mom. And I'm like, yes. And then my 3-year-old will go, we don't touch other people's vulvas. I'm like, that's exactly right. We need to talk about that. So thank you for mentioning it. I think it's a great partnership book, one for the kids, helping them with language, helping them with puberty pieces, helping them identify that folks identify how they identify. And then Melissa's book is for the adults as the companion piece of like, how do I talk? My kid just said vulva and penis. What do I do with that? And what do I do when we're talking about pimples and body changes? What do I do when we talk about gender and how not everything matches for every person? I think those things match really, really beautifully.
Thank you so very much. You too. I smell a future collaborations. Work that out. So, Mariotta, do that. Like I'm giving you. This is me saying, do that. Work that out. We need that. How is, as from the royal priesthood of activism? How is activism, particularly in like areas of sexuality and reproductive justice and things like that, how is that, if at all, a form of caregiving?
All right. You're gonna make me think tonight. I think that's a wonderful question. For me, in my experience, I have my work. So I have my day job that pays my bills, and I'm appreciative and thankful. And yet this is my passion work. And so for me, sexuality and reproductive justice go hand in hand. I can't have one without the other for me. I think in a way it allows me to caretake as someone who is a non-parenting person. It allows me to caretake for other folks who are in ways that that they may not be able to or may not necessarily have access to. What I love about Dr. Lexx and Melissa's books is that these are resources that non-parenting folks can certainly use to help build their own skills, right? So that we can continue to be a place of support and respite for parenting folks, right? So that when we are these trusted adults, when we are these aunties and godmothers and other people, that we are supporting the ways in which people are raising their children now, that the way that communities are building these foundational understandings of bodily autonomy and pleasure and respecting people and their pronouns and what does it look like to be able to do that in a way that honors what our community practices are, but then also establishes these are the things that we're going to do. These are the values that we hold. These are the places we're grounded in. And so I think it's important to be able to caretake in a way that is that really honors the work of parenting. I love the phrase domestic engineer. I'm going to use that. Dr. Lexx, you will get full credit. I think it's important to understand what does that look like for folks who choose to parent and for folks who are not parenting, how you can continue to show up, right? I think what happens for me in my experience is that in my passion work, I find myself in places where I've been told or it's been expressed to me that I have this nurturing sense of myself or that I'm caring or that I'm warm. And these are things that are typically associated with parenting or mothering or taking care of someone else. And so for me, this is a way that I get to do that allows me the opportunity to engage and hold things close that matter to me, that are valuable to me, that are precious to me. And I'm pouring into a community that has done that for me, right? And I get to make that real for myself, and it's tangible. It's not that and it's not about me getting credit for it, but that I'm future forward. I'm thinking about what's going to be there for Lex's gems, for Melissa's gems, right? For my gems. I'm doing it because I want it to be a lasting impact that is far beyond my time. And I'm serving the good for somebody else because somebody serves the good for me at some point. And that may be, some people may see that as really, or may hear that as a very, Pollyanna-ish. And I honor that, and that's great. I'm not Pollyanna. And I also hold that I get to hold that future forward perspective because that's what I'm working towards. And it's not for everybody. I'm built to hold this shelf. I've never been told that I can't hold this shelf. And so I'm not, my work is here for the people that I choose to serve in the community that's chosen to serve me. And I'm not going to apologize for that anymore. And I think part of being sex positive in parenting for Black folks in particular is to stop apologizing and to no longer have to figure out how to make other folks comfortable with the ways in which we choose to parent or support parenting with all of the trauma and the history that is present, and still choosing that we're going to find ways to heal and move forward and to embrace and to reclaim and to liberate at the end. There's no apology that needs to be offered to anybody for that. And so that's where I'm grounded in that. So that's a form of caregiving to me, is being able to be an agitator and to disrupt patterns that have been hard and harmful, and to figure out ways that we can do it differently, because we have done it differently. We've survived this long, not by accident. And so we have the right to determine how we're going to continue to keep striving and moving forward. That's my job. That's my job.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for that. We are coming down. We're at 9:20. And so there's one question I want to piggyback to have Dr. Lexx and Melissa answer. And then there's like a group question that I want for us to close with. But just piggybacking off of what my throat, what's happening there? Sorry, Mariotta said about Black sex positive parenting and not apologizing for it. Like, what else does that look like? What does it mean for those watching? We've been using terms like sex positive. We're using terms like reproductive justice and things like that. For those who are watching that may never have heard those or don't know what they look like lived out, what does it mean or look like to be a Black sex positive parent or family?
I'm going to yield to Melissa because I just talked a lot. So,
Yeah, so openness, creating space that liberation is something that is a goal in just kind of my everyday. I believe that we are models ultimately for our young people. And so it's not just about what we're, doing for them, but we have to serve and nurture and do for ourselves, which I think is something that can be radical. We may have grown up with caregivers, parents, caregivers who might have, who may not have prioritized themselves, And so I think that it is important that we set that example, and that includes finding spaces, making space for our own healing, because through that is how we will be able to facilitate something different, for our young people. And so for me, it's more about collaboration and less about holding things in silence or holding things in taboo, or creating that layer of power dynamics of, I'm the adult, you're the child, do what I say, not as I do, that kind of thing, that I know I grew up with. And I think that the revolution is in creating equity. If we want our world to be an equitable world, and we want our young people to be able to know and understand equity and identify equity in their relationships and ultimately in systems that they participate in, our family and our home is the very first system, that our young people will intersect with. And so it is a constant assessing, what kind of systems are we creating in our own home? What kind of dynamics, relational dynamics, are we going to allow our young people to get to experience? Because I know that because of the upbringing and the experiences, I went seeking out affection and attention, and I went seeking out the kind of relationship that I wasn't getting at home, and I don't want that for my young people, if they don't have to. And so I've had the great pleasure of getting to experiment because I think parenting is a big old experiment. And like the most, like, that is the research study ultimately, is parenting. But getting a chance to really try to create an environment where vulnerability is safe, and authenticity is safe, and I know that ultimately that'll keep them safer. If they can go to no one else or nothing else out there, they've got to be able to come home, to feel like they have a home to come to, and that home is affirming to them. I think that if I had a sense of that, that things could have been different, So I'm enjoying getting to realize that through parenting in this way.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you for their transparency. I share some of those wishes, like if I would have had. I've been watching like YouTube. Like my son is big on American Ninja Warrior, and there's a baby on YouTube who's like, his dad sets up like this whole thing all around the house, and he's like trying to be. He's like 4, but he wants to be American Ninja Warrior, and like he started off like jumping on the chair. And I was just watching, like, that would never happen in my house coming up. I would not be allowed to jump on the furniture. And my heart, like, literally ached for all of the chances Black children don't get to take for fear of like respectability politics, just all of these things. Like, you have to show up a certain way. Like, Black kids do not get to just be. And I thought, so he jumped on the chair and then he fell. And like in my head, I heard the echoes of, now get up before you hurt yourself. Because if you hurt yourself, I'm not taking you to the hospital. And then I heard the echo, but I also heard it in my own voice because I say it all the time. And think about the experiments that they don't do because it's too messy, and like all of those things, and like just like you said something key about like doing our own healing to show up for our kids in a way that they don't have to look over their shoulders or question themselves or make mistake. Like they get to be as big as they want to be because they get to fail. Like Black kids don't get to fail, or they don't have the safety net that some of other culture children get. And it's just, the work is never ending. So we're at 9:26. This was really good. And again, thank you so very much. As saucy and amazing as Black parenting, caregiving, whether you are a mother, a parent, an auntie, a guy, like whatever you are, there's just something special about having that connection, as we've all said. But we also still have work to do. So if you sum up in a minute or so, 30 seconds to a minute, for the culture, what do we need to do to level up?
Ooh. Okay, so this also ties with my Black sex positive parenting and the liberation work. The liberation work to me means that we were removing obstacles. Mm-hmm. And I parent from a point of pleasure instead of a point of prevention, right? So how do we build that pleasure into not just sex positivity and body autonomy, but pleasure means, how do we get pleasure outside of our house? How do we get pleasure in our friendships, our relationships, and our learning, in our work? And especially being Black and brown and being robbed of pleasure because of respectability politics, because of oppression, because of all of the shoulds, and you're not supposed to. You're not allowed to be Black in this way, or you're not allowed to be brown in this way. I think we have to remove those obstacles to our thinking and our existing. There's no one right way to be Black. There is no one right way to be brown. And there's really no one right way to be sex positive, because it's all about where you are and what your belief system is. So to level up and to get to that liberation, I think we start living for the pleasure of being. What is it, just being pleasurable in your body? Is it just to laugh and to laugh out loud and laugh full bellied? Is it not to suck your fat belly in? Is that pleasurable? Is it to be able to take off your shoes and enjoy the grass because that's what Black people do too, right? What does it look like to remove these obstacles from pleasure and start existing in that way and not being just preventative?
Thank you. Mariotta.
I sparkle all over to everything Dr. Lexx said. The only thing I would add is that we need to make that a practice of habit, of releasing these things as Black folks. And that looks a lot different for each and every one of us. And so I would encourage folks to consider, what would it look like to build a community that would support you in releasing these things, so that you can seek your liberation, so that you can find your freedom, so that you can parent without boundaries in a way that allows for the full breadth of these young folks, these new people, to fully blossom. And in turn, you experience a reblossoming, a rebirth, a release for yourself in the same way. And that we have the right to do that, that we have the right to fully exist as we are, with all of the things that we have within us, within our personhood and within our Blackness, across all the spectrums. We have the right to be fully present. And so that's what I would, that's the only piece I would offer.
Yes to all of that. And seeing the relationship that we have and can foster with these young people as a collaboration, as an opportunity to show up authentically with another human being, and to know that you're worthy of that as a caregiver, and that your young person is worthy of that, that we are whole humans and we can show up as whole humans, and And again, that may not be what a lot of us experienced. We may have experienced parenting where folks were ultimately holding back or inhibiting. And I think that goes back to joy, that goes back to pleasure. And so again, just setting that example and finding that for yourself as a caregiver, as a parent, and seeing that's the power. That's where the liberation and the power, lies, is in being that example, because ultimately it gives permission for your young people to do the same.
Whew. Well, that escalated quickly. This was absolutely amazing, as I knew it would be. We laughed. I held back tears. I can't speak for anybody else, but I would have cried, but I was trying to, do my good hosting. If you are watching, be sure to support all of our panelists and all of the amazing things that they are doing. Their contact information is in the description. Sex Positive _ families on Instagram for Melissa, Lexx, sex.lexx. Don't forget the two X's. Sex doc and the brown sugar, sex doc as well. And I am at the Intimacy Firm on everything. We will be back next week, same time, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Tuesday, we are digging into myth or medicine with the period doctor, Dr. Sharish Chambers, as well as Dr. Natalie Matherin. She is the Associate Director of the Greater Philadelphia Health Action here in Philadelphia, their medical clinics. So, and then on Thursday, we will look at 50 Shades of Black. 50 Shades of Black, looking at the diversity of experiences and presentations of Black women, what it means to be Black enough, being pretty for A, and then fill that sentence in with all the things, and what does colorism, texturism, all of those things with Dr. Donna Oriolo, Dr. Tracy Gilbert, as well as Dr. Zuleika Hepworth-Clark. And again, just giants in the industry that I am just like so humbled to even have. As you know, this series is leading up to November 28th, which is the release of My Vulva and Me, an anthology for, by, and about Black women. With the anthology was based off this series, and I have the pleasure to have Dr. Lexx as one of my co-authors, and I'm still ready to fight. I'm not going to tell y'all why, because you have to get the book to know, but please know, don't get on site, okay? It's on site. But it comes out November 28th. The pre-orders are available right now, www.intimacyfirm.com/My Vulva and Me. Ebook will be also available. And when I say for, by, and about Black women, I mean just that. The visionary author, she, me, her, Black woman. The foreword was written by Melissa Fredericks, co-host of the Love Hour podcast. She is a Black woman. The publisher is a Black woman. The artists inside is a Black woman, and all of the contributing authors are Black women, because we just do it better. It's just what it is. But again, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much to you all. Stay on. Don't hang up when this is all over. And we will see you all next week, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.